The Bridges to Prosperity bridge that we built in Gaseke, Rwanda was such an amazing project to be involved in. 10 of us engineers from the UK were out in Rwanda for 2 weeks building the bridge, but our involvement with the project started long before that. Once the team had been selected, we had various meetings, video conferences together with the Bridges to Prosperity team, and set about fundraising and spreading the word about the project. To fundraise, we did a load of different events, including a table football tournament at the Flint & Neil office in London, and to spread the word, we built a website and got the project on social media and started talking to whoever would listen whenever we could. Once we got to Rwanda, we went to go and visit our site straight away. We had to look at the scaffolding and materials we had available and redid a few calculations. The next day, we got up at sunrise and headed to the site. The first thing we did when we got there was meet the local workers, have the morning briefing, and distribute PPE and wristbands to show that people had been inducted that day. As soon as that was done, we started shifting some earth, digging some holes, and preparing to erect the scaffolding. All the time this was going on, the old bridge was still in use by the locals. It was a single steel beam spanning the river. Regularly, this beam becomes impassable in the rainy season. We were told that last year alone 3 school children were swept away and drowned on the way home from school. Once we had prepared the holes for the scaffolding anchors, we began to mix the concrete. Using the correct ratio of shovel loads, it was all mixed by hand. Once the scaffolding was up, we started to assemble the first tower. With a lot of help from the incredibly strong locals, we got the tower into position and bolted together. On the morning of the next day, we were ready to lift the first tower. It was decided that we'd do it by hand, with a load of people pulling a cable that went from the top of the tower, through a pulley on our scaffolding, and down to the opposite side of the river. This turned out to be really difficult. We did, eventually, manage to get the tower up and secured into position. We then got some deck boards across from the scaffolding to the top of the tower. That evening, during our health and safety meeting, we decided that we should try and lift the second tower using a winch. This turned out to be a much, much better solution that didn't really take any longer and was way safer. Once both towers were up, we carried the cables into position, across the river, and then fed each cable over a tower at each end. We pulled the cables as taut as we could by hand, and then used a winch to set the sag exactly. It was pretty difficult to hold the staff in exactly the right place in the wind, but once we got one cable up in the right position, it was much easier to set the cables level relative to one another. By the time the cables were all set, the rebar hangers had been bent by hand and the crossbeams were ready to be installed. We did this by launching them out from each end of the river, spacing them equally along a pull cable which had been marked out to the correct length. Once the hangers were all out, we finally had the shape of a bridge, even if it wasn't ready to be crossed yet. Once all the wood was cut, painted and drilled, we were ready to start laying the deck. The deck laying was a tough process, requiring a huge amount of teamwork and communication, but it was great fun. Once the handrail was installed, we finally had a completed bridge. By this stage, all the locals had figured out what it was that we were building if they had been on shore before, and everyone was really excited about the new bridge. The next day was the inauguration. We bought some goats for everyone to share and a bundle of beer. Once the ribbon was cut, we had a ceremony with loads of thanks for all the help we'd received and explaining to the community that this is their bridge for them to take pride and responsibility for. We had some more dancing, celebrating with the kids, and then we headed home. The experience was unbelievable, both professionally and personally. Professionally, I learnt so much. The site experience was invaluable for me as a designer. Both working with the locals and the contractors on our team really taught me a lot. It was fascinating to see how the 2 different halves of our team, half from Flint Neil design office in London and half from a major contractor, approached different problems differently. In my daily work as a designer, it has influenced my understanding of buildability and how important it is. Personally, I loved it. Playing with the kids, chasing them across the fields and down the paths with the camera as they yelped with excitement. Trying to keep them entertained off the site whilst we were working at height. The project was an amazing one to be involved in, and I'm really excited about all the bridges that Bridges to Prosperity are building now and will continue to build long into the future.